I'm excited to have a guest with a really unique background and experience that he's going to share that will apply to all of us. We all have two eyes. We all have a back. And so what he's going to share will impact every single one of us. And if you have someone in your family, a coworker, or a friend, where you think the tips that are shared today might apply to them, I would encourage you to share this with them. Because oftentimes what I've learned in this world of health is we just don't even know what we don't know many times. And, even what we might think are small pieces of wisdom or nuggets of knowledge can be hugely helpful to someone, where that might be applicable to them, i.e. someone that's dealing with back issues. Just a simple tip to us might be a huge deal to that individual. So with all that said, Meir Schneider is my guest today. Amazing individual. And, I've been dealing with some eye issues for the last year. So I came across him in his book, and he wrote a great book, Vision for Life. And the more I learned about his background, the more fascinating he became. And so I paid for like a 3 or 4 hour session with him. So my wife and I joined him about 3 or 4 months ago. Just a wealth of knowledge and ideas, and even more so when you hear his story. And so leading up to my introduction here, he just got back from a trip throughout Europe. He spent a lot of time in Israel, and he just got back into the US, and we're doing this podcast. So with all of that said, Meir Schneider, so happy you're here. Welcome, and give everyone a little bit of your background if you don't mind doing that.
So first of all, thank you so much, Rob, for having me on your podcast. I was born with cataracts. Now, cataracts are not something that most people are born into. Most people do get cataract in their 60s and 70s, and we can prevent it, by the way. But I was born with it. And it's interesting, I was born to deaf parents, no connection to my cataract, except for one, that my father was selling the pictures of the Trinities, Jewish deaf photographer, stole the Trinity to churches, and under Stalin's rule, it was illegal. They had a quota, and we could have gone to Siberia for that. Wow. And he put a laboratory at home that had so many chemicals, and I was a very sick infant. And my 2 kids, by the way, were born with cataracts. So they probably inherited it from me. And in my generation, they did not know how to deal with cataracts. For example, I'm going to show you, this is a normal lens, and this is mine after 5 surgeries.
And I'm just going to say, since a lot of people are listening to this, what he's showing me is a picture of a black pupil. And on the other one, this one that is like 75% filled in with brown.
Exactly. Basically 1% of my lens allows the light to go through.
Wow.
So I was the quickest Braille reader in the state of Israel. And I thought that my life is going to be a life of a blind person, or legally blind, whichever you want to call it. And then I discovered exercises with a person who was denounced. His name was Dr. Bates from the United States. And I discovered that in Israel. Aldous Huxley was a known author, wrote a book about it. It was called The Art of Seeing. And I had a kid, a high school dropout, who have shown me eye exercises. My parents opposed it. My teachers opposed it. Kids made fun out of me. And I worked with those exercises 13 hours a day, every day, and improved eventually my vision from 1% to 70%. And today I read, write, and write.
Wow.
So then I started to see that hardly anyone does this kind of work. And I learned different methods with which I can teach people how to do this work. And eventually, in spite of the fact that I don't have the regular medical credentials, many physicians who are decided to leave the normal way of looking started to study with me. So, for example, in the trip that I had now, I went to Spain, and there was a special town that most people don't know. It's called Alhuenda, where we were conducting a workshop to 34 people, among them ophthalmologists, optometrists, and teachers of natural vision improvement, where we have shown them how to improve vision, not only for the regular person who wears glasses, but for low vision. And then I had nice work in France and in Germany and in Israel. We had, of course, we had to go into the shelter twice a day when they threw on us rockets. But I kept teaching in the shelter. It didn't make any difference to me. But the bombing stopped because of the ceasefire with Hezbollah. And the last session I was teaching was in the beach of Tel Aviv to 70 people. They came from all over the country. And it's not a big country, but when it's a small country, driving for 4.5 hours is a huge distance. Here in the United States, nobody can relate to that because the distance here are very big. In Australia, definitely not. But Israel is so small. You come all the way from the Red Sea, from Eilat. It's a long distance. I had 70 people. We all looked at the sea, and the sea really was healing to our eyes. And we did the exercise in the sun. So I've written my book, Vision for Life. Vision for Life. It's published by North Atlantic, and you can get it also from our store. And of course, you can get it online. And it is a book that brings the principles of natural vision improvement to the world. Among them is the fact that you should never strain to see. That strain is a big portion of vision problems. Again, strain is a big portion of vision problem. And to add to it, unfelt strain, when you are numb to your strain and you don't know that you're straining, that spoils the eye more than anything else. So you can have signs and symptoms of that you strain. First of all, your blinking is being reduced. You find yourself that you blink, but not that often. And you know that you're straining. Second, you lose your periphery. Not that you don't have your periphery. Some people really lose the periphery and they come to me to learn how to gain it back, like people with glaucoma and people with retinitis pigmentosa. But I'm talking to the average audience. You don't pay attention that there's floor, ceiling, or walls. You lost your periphery. That means you strain. And if you breathe quickly and shallow, that means you strain. So deep breathing, blinking, and sensing the periphery means you don't strain. And we have wonderful exercise for that. Then we're talking about deep relaxation of the eyes. And that's so important because the eyes are so stressed from looking from near. Looking at smartphones, looking at videos. That's why it's so good that you're on the radio. People can sit down. And by the way, there's an exercise I like to guide you to, and that is that you rub your hands and that you lean on a couple of pillows on the table, and you put your hands very gently around your eye orbits, and you visualize that you see nothing. And the color of nothing is black. The color of relaxation is blue. But the color of nothing, that means the optic nerve is relaxing, is black. And that is so important to do that. Now, it doesn't always work. It doesn't work if you're stressed, if your shoulders are tight, if your back is stiff. But it does work if you're loose, and maybe you do some loosening exercises on the way, as it's written in my book, Vision for Life. And then that's one part. And you have to do it every day for at least 3 times, 6 minutes, 3 times a day. Rest from your stress. The second thing is learn to adapt to the sun. The medical profession tries to convince the whole world that we must escape the sun. They did it in the 80s, and they told us stay away from the sun. It causes skin cancer. And then they learned that so many people lose their bones not being in the sun. Because we need vitamin D, and we can get it mainly from exposure to the sunlight. Now they tell us, and they told us that too, wear sunglasses. It will save you from, and they give you a list of things. None of it is true. None of it is true. What is true is that we need to find a way to adjust to the sun. And the smart way to adjust to the sun, as it is in my videos, like Yoga for Your Eyes, which was a bestseller, the way to adjust to the sun is to close the eyes and gently move the head all the way from side to side. And not only you move it to the side, You move it so much to the side towards your shoulder, with the chin towards the shoulder, that it becomes dark when you move to the side. So it's dark and light, dark and light. And before you know it, you do it 20 minutes a day for a couple of months, and the sun does not bother you. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't wear sunglasses, maybe mild one, when you drive to a sunrise or to a sunset. But basically, you're weakening your pupils by wearing them. You're weakening your retina by wearing them. And you don't save your eyes from any illness. And we have sunglasses inside our retina. It's the melanin pigment. And it also affects our skin. They tried to teach Aborigines to wear sunglasses, trying to think that will help them. And first time in their history, they got sunburn. So I would like to make my case against sunglasses. And unless you want to go to a party and you don't want anyone to know you, then I'm all for it. But otherwise, don't wear them. And then it's very important.
Can I just pause real quick right here for a second?
Sure.
So number one, I totally agree with you. I mean, we all acknowledge there's a certain place for Western medicine, right? There's certain times where it's very helpful. If you need a kidney transplant, break a bone, very helpful. But at the same time, it's really interesting. And anybody that's listened to our podcast knows my feelings on this are very similar in that there's very much a place for Western medicine. However, in many cases, we've closed out so many other things that are very helpful to us. And I'll just give you an example of this. I was talking with a good friend of mine that was a doctor, and he told me, yeah, they just changed the policy on these delivering babies on how we do it. Now we do it this way. I'm like, well, wasn't it exactly opposite 10 years ago? He's like, yeah. And so he said, effectively, they were doing the wrong thing for almost 30 years. And so I'm not trying to berate Western medicine, but rather just saying that there are many alternatives out there that we ought to consider, that we ought to look at and learn about. And, one thing that I've been learning on my own journey that it reinforces what you're talking about is the importance of taking care of the eyes and treating them like we do exercise. And so I just want to reiterate a couple of these exercises that you pointed out. Number one, highlighting the fact that so many of us are straining our eyes because of cell phones, computers, and so many other things without even realizing it oftentimes. And so 2 exercises you just gave us just now, and I want to reiterate these, is number one, 3 times a day for around 5 minutes-ish, just rubbing the hands together, if you can hear that, placing the hands over the eyes, and if you have a pillow to lean on the pillow just to rest. Rest to decrease stress. I think you said something like that. That was awesome. And you're just creating a place for total blackness where the eyes and the pupils can relax. And then the second that you gave us was this sunning technique where, obviously we're not just sitting in the sun baking for 2 hours, but rather look at the sun periodically with our eyes closed and just back and forth this rotation from shoulder to shoulder. And again, the training that I've been doing in another place really supports that. And what it's doing is teaching and helping the pupils to expand and dilate and then, constrict, right? And so more light, obviously constrict. Less light, they're going to dilate. And it's exercising those muscles in a very natural and healthy way. So it's just back and forth, shoulder to shoulder with our eyes closed, especially if the sun is low or high, low on the horizon, sunset, sunrise time frame. Did I capture those 2 exercises correctly? And did I restate them correctly?
Absolutely. I want to say we don't look at the sun because our eyes are closed gently, as if we're going to sleep, but we face the sun and we move the head from side to side and we strengthen the muscles. While wearing sunglasses, and some people, and it breaks my heart, wear it indoors, is weakening the pupils.
Right.
And
so can I just ask you, are there 1 or 2 other tips that you might give us related to the eyes? Because I know you also want to talk about backs and joints. And so I'd like to spend at least 10 minutes on that, since this is a relatively quick podcast of 30 minutes. What's a couple of other tips that someone might consider for their eyes that they could easily do?
So, for example, most of us narrow our periphery. That's a form of stress. So one of my recommendations is to understand that periphery is getting stimulated with movement. It's made from the time of the jungle when we sense branches move. We knew if there's something there that wants to eat us, right? And then we look at it. So waving the hands to the side is a very, very good way to relax the eyes. And one of the things that I teach people is to put a paper, it could be a small paper, between the eyes, basically, on the bridge of the nose to block the central vision. You can wave your hands to the side. You can walk a little bit with it because it needs movement. And you add the periphery to your vision. Many times, not using our periphery makes us lose our vision. In my opinion, that's the main reason why people eventually have high pressure in the eyes, have glaucoma, and lose the vision. So expanding our periphery is very important.
So can I just highlight, Meir, can I just highlight two things for the people listening that you just did right there? So imagine taking your hands, if you're listening, putting them to the sides of your eyes where you're engaging the periphery and just kind of flashing the hands as you're pointing your fingers towards your face. In other words, you can just feel it engaging the periphery. And then what Meir just did and showed me on the video is you're taking a piece of paper, just a little black piece of paper, I guess whatever color you want, and you're just placing that over your nose. So just imagine like a little 1 inch or 2 inch by 1 or 2 inches. You place that over your nose, and if you look towards the inside with either eyeball, you're not going to be able to see that direction. So again, what he's saying is it's forcing our eyes to engage more of the periphery around that. I just wanted to highlight that for the listeners, trying to clear that.
And so what you do is you put on the bridge of the nose.
Yep.
So basically you block a little bit of each eye. You look straight and you wave your hands to the side, and you can even move your whole body up and down, and you walk with it. And that immediately makes the brain pay attention to the periphery. And doing it just for 15 seconds here, 30 seconds there, can make a huge difference. And one couple more things, and this is blinking is so important. Pay attention whether you blink or not. And if you don't find yourself blinking enough, massage around your eyes from the bridge of the nose, to the temples, from the nose to the ears, and put a compress of cold water around your eyes for a minute. And then you'll find yourself blinking more. That's very, very important, because blinking is the massage that your eyes get all the time, and they give you a lot of relaxation. Very important. And the last but not least, don't strain, but look at smaller details than you tend to see. You think, Rob, that you see my face as a whole face, but actually you see a bit of my face each time, and you automatically in nanoseconds, thousands of seconds, you move from area to area of my face, and that gives you a picture. Just like when you go and listen to an orchestra, you think you hear 20 players at once, but actually you hear them one at a time, and you put them together in your brain. That is exactly how we see. And by losing that, we have the greatest reason for blindness in the central vision in the world, macular degeneration. People did not lose it in the past because they were curious about details. But because we're not curious about the print that we read, we're curious about the contents that they're telling us about. We're not curious about the dwelling that we have because we already know it. We're not curious about our shopping. We just want to shop for our item. We need to return to the place where we learn to look at details, but not to try and see them, because we may not see well, especially if we look without glasses, but just look at them. And then we restore and regain our macula, the most important part of the central vision. So again, blinking and looking at details.
I love these comments. I've just been taking notes again. I'll just share a quick side note, and then we'll jump into the back and joints. And that is this: if we don't slow down and focus on our bodies and brains will force us to slow down to focus on them at some point. And I know that, many of us 20 years old, 25, 30, we're invincible. The body functions very well in many cases. But at some point, to what you're getting at there, Meir, is that if we don't take care of it, it's going to catch up with us, and things are going to show up. And our natural human nature for most of us is just to kick the can down the road. It's like a car, right? We don't go in and take it to the shop until there's a banging noise. Really, actually a poor approach, though, to taking care of our own health. just having experienced this, watching my mom go through her journey of early onset Alzheimer's, there's so much that we can do with neuroplasticity and the rewiring of the brain and training different muscles, including the brain muscles, so to speak. And these are some powerful exercises that you're sharing. I just want to, I've been doing them myself over the last few months, and it has helped me tremendously. And so I don't want to minimize the impact of what might seem like a small little exercise, because to your point, if you're listening to this right now, I just want you to sit back and think to yourself, how often and how many times in the last week have you made time to do any of these types of things for your eyes or for breathing, for any other part of our body? But the point is, some of these are just very natural and we can do them in seconds. So these have been great tips that you have shared, Meir. Can I just summarize them very briefly? So the hands over the eyes 3 times a day. The deep relaxation of the eyes is the intent behind that. The sunning, the back and forth with the eyes gently closed, facing the sun, engaging the periphery by waving the hands, putting a piece of paper on the bridge of the nose to force the eyes into the periphery. Let's see, you talked about putting a cold compress around the eyes, and then just the massage around the eyes and that ocular muscle around the actual eyeball, which I actually do multiple times a day now. And all of these are so easy to do. And so just a quick little recap, but those are great tips that anybody can do right now. I want to shift with the time that we have, because you brought this up, Meir, and I know it's a big deal for a lot of people, into the backs and joints. I've had
Can I just
add
one thing? We have a potential to wake up a lot of brain cells, but every brain cell that wakes up, one brain cell will not wake up. It has to be 100,000 neurons who work on any function. It has 28 days to wake up, or it dies out, and then we have to wake up again. So, for example, if your habit is to blink more frequently, you got to pay attention that you do, because if you don't, you'll stop doing it anyway. If we're talking about looking at details, waking up your periphery, it has to be repeated, or else the cells that do it will stop doing it. So the repetition is the name of success here.
Yeah, I love that reminder. And so 2 parts to that, right? We have to have the awareness of what to do, and then it's about the consistency of doing it. So let's go over to the backs and the joints. I know that there's no way that we can even get very deep into the discussion, but what are a few things that people can do or be aware of as it relates to backs and joints? Because I'm 49 this year, which for some is old and for some is young, but I'm definitely feeling those things, and I'm taking pretty good care of my body. But that's the whole idea, is there's things we can do and be aware of. So what are some of those things, Meir?
So first of all, we have to be aware of the fact that the back bones cannot hold themselves. It's the muscles that hold them. And what happens is that we learn to use them in a rigid way. One of the worst things that we could do for our muscles is continuously to sit. But what choice we had? I had to fly to Europe, and then I can tell you that flying from Tel Aviv to Los Angeles, which was just 14 hours in the air, not talking about the fact that we had to sit for half an hour before customs opens in the Los Angeles airport. That's a lot of sitting. And what we need to do, we have no choice but to sit these days. We need to sometimes sit on the floor, cross-legged, and not always on a chair. But the other thing that we need to do, and we have to do it on a regular basis, is to stand up, hold to our chair if we need it for balance, and grab our leg, pull it backwards, push the chest forwards until the head looks at the ceiling, which means you don't put your neck backwards, you push your chest forwards until the head falls backwards. What you're doing now is opposite than sitting. You're taking the same muscles, they're called the psoas iliacus, and that contract while you're sitting, and you get them to be stretched. You get the thigh muscles to be stretched, the quadriceps, you get the chest muscles to be stretched. And the back is a vehicle to improve the whole body. Taking back your back is going to be my next book. And it is there to help you to increase the awareness of what you need to do. The other thing we should know is that most of the muscles that we have we never use, not in our regular life. In fact, in sports, sometimes you add few muscles, sometimes you don't, and you strain the same muscles that you strain all the time. Look at what they do in the gym. You already overwork your chest muscles, so they make you build them up more. But truth of the matter is that quite a few muscles we never use, and there's a great imbalance that squeezes the joints. And there aren't many athletes that don't have arthritis. And I don't suggest that you will sit. In fact, I believe in running, in walking, in skiing, in doing all those things. But then you need to do the opposite activity for your body. And you need to start and use parts that you never use. And I have many examples for that. For example, the toes. If you had an armless person, they can feed themselves with the toes often. And we don't have any control over our toes. We squeeze them in shoes, walk with them on cement, and what happens is then the ankle becomes stiff, the knees become stiff, the hip joints become stiff, the back becomes stiff, and the neck becomes stiff, and the jaws allow dentists to give you thousands of dollars worth of correction to put a kind of a guard for the bite. But the whole thing starts in your toes and in your fingers. If you learn to stretch the fingers opposite than what you normally do with them, and you learn to move each toe separately by holding the rest of them, you will alleviate your neck from a lot of stress. And so the whole body pulls the neck down, and neck tension is a reason for strokes, is a reason for eye problems, is a reason for many, many issues, even tinnitus and problems with hearing. So we have to let go of tension in the neck. And you can do it. I can show you an exercise we can all do towards the end, was working on the neck directly, but it has to start with the toes and with the fingers.
So when you say move the toes and work each toe separately,
right?
Can you explain that in maybe a minute?
Right. You hold all four toes and you move the big toe in rotating motion in both directions. You hold the three toes below and the one toe above, and you move the second toe in rotating motion. You do it with the third toe in rotating motion, fourth toe and fifth toe. And I cannot tell you how much people wrinkle their faces and say, how can anyone move their toes? But you can. Let me give you an example. If you now sit and you try to walk with your feet curling the toes, that's easy, right? You just walk with your feet curling your toes. Now, if you stand and you try to walk forwards with your toes, I had actually a good class. Out of 52, at least 3 could do it, which was amazing. But that's not the average. That's what I had in Tel Aviv. Normally, people can't curl their toes while they're standing because they became weak. And if the toes are weak, then the whole foot is like a burden on the ankles, because the muscles of the toes basically is most of the flesh of the feet. So then the ankles become stiff. And if the ankles become stiff, the knees will be stiff. The hip joints will be stiff. By the way, that's why so many people lose the hip joint. And then the back becomes stiff, and then the neck becomes stiff. So, for example, if everybody right now who hears me, let's work on muscle which is easy, and that is the side muscles. I would like to ask you, and maybe, Rob, you can time me. Lift your leg up for 30 seconds. I mean, as high as you can.
And when he says, just so that everyone can visualize this, he's standing behind a chair, holding it with one hand, and he's lifting his left leg straight out horizontally away from his body to the left. So it's not putting the leg out in front of you, but just holding it straight out to the left is what he's doing with his left leg.
And you can move your foot in rotating motion and whatever have you. You can time me for 30 seconds. Although I can tell you in my class, I timed them for 2 or 3 minutes. And I hear comments, yeah? So
yeah, that's about the 30-second mark.
Okay, good. And then if you stand, you can see that your shoulder is looser. You can see that the foot is more on the ground if you really did that. And let's do the other leg because we have to balance it, right? So give us 30 seconds, please. And we can do that. That's, for example, a group of muscles, the abductors of the leg, most people don't use. They use, again, the flexors, but not much the extensors and the abductors. And so if you do that, you prevent so many back problems because you use so much of the side muscles.
And there's 30 seconds again.
All right. Wonderful. And if you did that, you can see that you stand more firmly on the ground and your back became looser. So being able to use muscles that we never ever used before and starting to activate them and learning to stretch the back in a way that works for the back can make all the difference in the world for your back and for your life.
So one of the guiding principles behind this whole discussion, Meir, I can very easily see it's just movement. It's moving and doing specific things that move different parts of our body. And I like what you said about, finding a counter movement to a certain movement. So if we're doing, just chest press, for example, all the time, well, that's great, but what's a counter movement to that? And so just a lot of this principle is just movement. And we have to acknowledge, I think that for most of us, we live a very sedentary lifestyle. It's sitting, walking somewhere else, sitting again, looking at the phone, hunched over. And we just, as a general population, I think, live a very sedentary type lifestyle. So you're really just getting at specific movements. I've never done the toe movements you're describing. I'm actually going to go do those this evening. So never actually rotated the toes. I've done toe exercises, but I've never done it the way you just described it. And just something as simple as standing up next to a chair and doing what you did with those leg extensions out to the side. Anybody can do that. So what you can see and hear is someone that has an incredible amount of wisdom here. We could talk for literally hours about this. What I would encourage everyone to do is get a copy of his book, especially for the eyes, part of the equation, the eye side of it, which is Visions for Life, or Vision for Life, I should say. The next one coming out is going to be focused on the back. There's a website you can go to. You can get us on his email list. You can also look at some of his courses. He has all kinds of stuff to look at. And I've done many of his exercises, and there's a ton that I haven't done still. His website is self-healing.org. So self-healing.org. And you can put in your email, your first name, your email, and he will send out some great advice, tips, etc. via email, all of which I've been watching, for the last several months come in. And that's why we're here on the podcast. It's been so helpful for us, meaning my wife and I. So he also has some classes. You can see those on his website. He has one coming up in February, another in March. Obviously, that's if you're listening to this early in 2025. If you're listening to it down the road, you can go to his website, self-healing.org, and get, any future dates that might show up as far as trainings. You can take this as far as you want. Whether it's just starting with the book, Vision for Life, which I've looked through, there's just a ton of exercises in it. Or if it really resonates with you, then obviously, his in-person course might be a viable option as well. Again, that you can take as far as you would like to. I think the whole point of wanting to do this podcast was to create an awareness for each one of us about the importance of what we can do to take care of our incredible gift in our bodies. And that there's so many things that we can do without just putting more medicine into it. And I'm the very first to say, I acknowledge again, there's a place for Western medicine. However, I've been told that with my own eye thing that I was dealing with by Western doctors, that there's no cure for it. There's nothing you can do. And all of a sudden it's 70% better. And what you experienced, Meir, growing up in Israel, no eyesight, and everyone around you saying it's not possible. And yet you've done it. You've regained your eyesight. And I've seen that story happen over and over again. So number one, it does take work. It does take effort. It does take consistency. But if we neglect it, the price is way higher. I would way rather put in some work and some effort on the front end, do some of these exercises, than deal with the consequences of not doing them down the road. So Meir, any final comments as we wrap up for today? You've been awesome. These tons of tips just to start with in a 30-minute, quick podcast. Anything that you want to say, closing comments?
The potential that we have to get better is huge. I'll never forget the lady who came to me at the age of 18, and she thought she was blind in one of her eyes. But when I patched the eye that was seeing and put her in a room, dark room, and got a light to blink, we woke up that eye that was supposedly blind, And we learned in that session that it was actually a lazy eye. And her mother said, but all the doctors in Canada, she came to me from Alberta, thought that she's blind. And she thought she was blind, and her parents thought she was blind. But there was a latent ability to see. And when we developed that, the vision in the other eye became much stronger. What I want to say is you have a latent potential, and you're losing your ability to do it when you're not focused on yourself. And what you have to do is to learn that there are parts of your brain that you could use that you never used before. There are muscles. We have more than 600 muscles. Most of us use between 50 and 75 of them with great vigor. There are muscles we never pay attention to. They become dormant. And we have ability to be vital, strong, just like that lady that started to see. And actually, she had that sight, but it was hidden from her. So you have an ability to move forwards, to prevent all those diseases that get you to sit in a doctor's office for so long. And I completely agree with Rob. There are moments that I send people to have a surgery, and I inform them there's no other way. There are moments when I tell them, you have to take those drugs. There's no other way to deal with the situation. But then you have to understand that 1 out of every 7 people in the hospital is there because contradictory medications or bad medications or bad procedure. And then you have to understand that the most important thing is for you to use your powers to get better. And that's what we call our work self-healing. We work in coordination with our clients. We teach them the intuition of how to work on themselves better.
Awesome. Well, it's been amazing visiting with you. I know that our podcast listeners have gotten a lot out of this. Just some great insights. So thank you, Meir. Appreciate it. All of our listeners, thank you. Hope you have a wonderful day. Great rest of your week. Perfect. That was it. Done.
It worked well, huh? You are a great interview. I mean, there are very few people like you.
Well, that was fabulous, Meir. That was